Texas gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke held a campaign event in Nacogdoches, Texas on Tuesday. During his wide-ranging remarks, he vowed to fight, quote, for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. Abortion access has been central to O'Rourke's campaign since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, setting the issue of abortion to the states.
Connected to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and those of you here in Nacogdoches. And yet I'm going to argue today that we have so much in common, far more that unites us than could ever divide us. And if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're an independent, I want you to know that you are welcome here. If you are gay, if you are straight, I love you all the same. I want to make sure that we are able to deliver for you when we win this election. I want to make sure that every single one of us, regardless of our differences, is treated the same under the law. The genius of this country, at least in my opinion, is that when we started this experiment, casi 246 years ago, it began with the premise that all of us are created equally, and that we should be treated equally under the law. Now, we have never, ever, in the life of this country, ever achieved that. But I'd love to think that we've never stopped striving to be able to get there. And we know that if we achieve that goal, not only do we do better for one another, especially those who are marginalized or attacked or even have the full power of the state of Texas levied against them right now, but all of us do better as a result. We're all the beneficiaries of the genius that will be revealed by each and every single one of our fellow Texans who's able to live up to their full potential, who's able to fulfill their promise for themselves and for all of us. And it's why it gives me such confidence that this race that we are running together right now, of, by, and for the people of Texas, is not just the right thing to do at the right time with the right people. It's also a race that's going to win this election on the night of November 8th. You all ready to do this? Here's how I know that we're going to win. We are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. We, together, are going to prioritize the lives of our kids over the interests of the NRA, or the gun lobby, or anybody else. We're going to make sure that our educators, school teachers, counselors, and librarians get treated with the respect that they deserve, that they earn, that we owe them. For those future educators right here in this room today, you need to know that I have your back. You're about to enter one of the toughest positions and one of the hardest times to ever be an educator in the history of the state of Texas. And I'm going to make it my mission, especially in this county, where on average a school teacher is underpaid against the national average by $16,500 a year, which means you're not working one job, you're working two, you're working three to make ends meet, not for kicks or spending cash, but to meet the note on the mortgage or put food on the table or be able to fill the prescription that literally keeps you alive. But there's more to this. You also demand respect, and that means we listen to you when you tell us what is best for you to be able to connect with that child in front of you in that classroom. You're trying to draw forth a lifelong love of learning. Stoke their curiosity. Once you get that started in that kid's head, there is no stopping them, and by extension, all of us. So after 2 years of a pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, 2 years where we're literally trying to keep so many of these kids alive, you've told me that these high stakes, high pressure, standardized tests that in no way effectively measure the potential of that child or the effort that you are expending on her behalf, that we can do better. So when we win, we're going to cancel the STAR test in the state of Texas. Give you that classroom time back to connect with those kids and allow you to follow your passion. Allow them to do their very best. Tell you somebody else that we're here for. Every woman, every man who's ever worn the uniform of this country. We spare no expense to send you off to war, to ask you to potentially lose your life on the part of all of ours, or take the lives of others in the name of this country. But we somehow as the wealthiest, most powerful country the world has ever known, have a hard time coming up with the resources when you return to our communities. Getting an appointment at the VA can be a months or years long ordeal for far too many veterans. In this state, which boasts the 9th largest economy on the planet today, while we're sleeping comfortably in our dorm rooms or hotel rooms tonight, there will be hundreds of veterans in this state sleeping on the side of the road, under a bridge, on a park bench. What if we said we will bear any burden to make sure every single one of those veterans has a home? That home is their starting place for a job, for a career, for the care that they need. And if they have come back exposed to these toxic burn pits that we hear about from Iraq and Afghanistan, breathing in literally God only knows what, as we burn up the medical waste and body parts and toxins and chemicals, and now that they're back here in Nacogdoches, they're having a hard time just breathing at home, at work, or at school. We set up a toxic burn pit registry in this state, connect every veteran with that care that literally might save their lives. And when they tell us, as they have told me, hey Beto, when I do get into the VA, and I go there for my post-traumatic stress disorder, or traumatic brain injury, or those signature wounds and conditions incurred in combat and service to this country, the VA is all too willing to prescribe me an opioid, to which I may become addicted, and that addiction I may die from. But there's something else that I can use that relieves my symptoms, restores my appetite, allows me to sleep at night. But to use that in the state of Texas makes me a criminal in the eyes of the law. That's why we're going to legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. And given the fact that so many of those who have served time for possession are black and brown, although Texans of every ethnicity and race use the substance at about the same rate, more likely than not, if you're black or brown, you're stopped, you are frisked, you are incarcerated. Upon release, you have to check a box on every employment application form going forward saying that you have that conviction, which makes it that much less likely that you ever land the job. Try getting a loan when that's on your record, either to go to school here or to start a small business. Your options and opportunities over the course of your life are narrowed and constrained. So legalizing marijuana is a start, but it's not enough. We must also expunge the arrest records for anyone who has served time for possession of substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country today. It's just the right thing to do. And we're also here for every one of you, the voters of the state of Texas. And I'll tell you why. This is the toughest state in the union in which to cast a ballot or to get your name on the rolls to be registered to vote. Why that is, we can only begin to assume some motives. I'll give you some facts and allow you to draw your own conclusions. 750 polling places have been shut down in this, the fastest growing state in America. That's twice the number of the next closest state. And you know where those closures take place? In the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in the state of Texas. And I'll give you an example. You may have remembered seeing this last election day, and I promise you'll see it next election day. A line 6 hours deep outside of Texas Southern University in Houston. Not 6 hours deep because people are so anxious and hungry and want to vote so urgently. It's because those polling place closures have occurred in that neighborhood, and that's the one place for all of these people to go. And for everyone willing to wait 6 hours, can you imagine how many others are working a $7.25 an hour job or two $7.25 an hour jobs and don't have the time to wait, or they're raising their kids or taking care of their folks? They're just living their life where they say, the hell with it. Why would I ever suffer this indignity in my own country to wait 6 hours to vote? You can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the polling place. But in this state, one of the only in the union that doesn't allow this, you can't use your student ID here at SFA to prove who you are at the polling place. This voter suppression and voter intimidation is not aimed at people like me, of my age. I just turned 50, so I'm on my road to old fogey, right? It is aimed at you, at the very young. who are going to this university right now. It is aimed at black and brown people across the state of Texas, as it always has been since the end of Reconstruction in Texas. But we have a chance to overcome this, and I'll tell you how. Not only must we win this election on the night of November 8th, but we must ensure that it's easier to get on the rolls. That means online voter registration and automatic voter registration. When you turn 18, you should automatically be registered to vote. Same-day voter registration. Replacing gerrymandering, where members of Congress choose their voters, with citizen-led redistricting commissions, where you draw the district and include yourself in, so you're no longer drawn out. And then, let me try this one on for size. What if we replaced Confederate Heroes Day as a celebrated state holiday with Election Day as a celebrated state holiday, so you take the day off of school or off of work and be able to find the time to vote? I want to make sure that we also do common sense, bipartisan things that we're not going to be able to find the Republican or the Democrat or the Independent, for that matter, to take the other side of the argument on. Let me give you an example. You probably know this, we're the least insured state in the United States of America. It means it's harder in Texas than anywhere else to see a doctor, to fill a prescription, and to go to a mental health care provider. Especially for those with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression. East Texas, I just left Harrison County. There's not a single psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, therapist that many people can go to relieve their symptoms. And you know where the largest provider of mental health care services is in the state of Texas today? It's the county jail system. Folks will literally get locked up on purpose to go to the one place they're guaranteed any kind of care, no matter how insufficient or immoral that might be. You and I are paying for $120 a night to keep someone locked up. The only place that they can go. For a fraction of that, we could expand Medicaid in the state of Texas, bring $10 billion in to this state of our own federal income taxes. Money you and I have paid up to the federal government comes back to us. Hire up those clinicians, those doctors, those nurses, those psychiatrists and psychologists. Connect more people with care. All I want is that you be well enough, healthy enough, to finish your education, to go to work, to raise your family, to run for office, to do whatever you were placed on this planet to perform in the first place, only you need to be well enough to be able to do it. The other thing that I want to make sure that we do, and this is something I hope that all of us can get behind, is that whatever the differences are between us, we seek out the common ground. No two people are ever going to agree on everything all the time. I'm here with my wife, Amy, who's right here. She can attest to this, 17 years of marriage. But we still find the things that matter most in raising our kids or running our house or running this campaign over the course of the last year. We find what the greater good is, and both of us get behind it, and it is so damn fulfilling for us. It's a sense of purpose in our lives that I think every single person wants to have. And I say this because I don't know that this state, I don't know that this country has ever been as divided and polarized as it is today. And we've got a government who seeks to define us based on our differences, who wants us to be scared of one another. And that fear can sometimes engender outright hatred. Let me give you some examples. You ask the governor about legitimate concerns that you might have, and he'll distract you or deflect and tell you to watch out for CRT, critical race theory, which, as far as I know, is a course that is only taught in graduate schools. But he wants you to think that your first grader or second grader is in a graduate level course on critical race theory right now. When the real challenge is, shouldn't we be able to tell the full story, the full history of the people of the state of Texas, right? Those of you whose ancestors came here 15,000 years ago, a reminder that right now we are standing on indigenous land. Others who were kidnapped from another continent, brought here in bondage, and forced to build the success and the wealth and the strength of this country without ever being able to partake in what they had made possible. And yet others who came here of their own volition because they knew that to stay where they were from meant certain death. For the O'Rourkes in the 19th century, to stay in Ireland in the midst of a famine that killed 1 million people meant to die. And so they came here to this country. Think about that when this governor tries to make you afraid of immigrants who are trying to come here right now for the same purpose. John Lewis, with whom I had the extraordinary honor of serving in Congress for 6 years, used to say, look, we all came here at some time in a different ship in a different year. But today, right now, we're in the same boat. When he tries to scare you about transgender kids or accuse their parents of child abuse and turn those children over to CPS, perhaps the worst run foster care program in the United States of America, when he vilifies and demonizes those from other places who may not look like the majority of those who live in the United States of America, just remember what made us great in the first place. It was all of us through this extraordinary democracy, finding enough common ground despite our differences to be able to move forward. In other words, right now, a governor who traffics in fear is not reflective of us and doesn't have to be our future, our fortune, or our fate. We can decide that we will not be governed by fear, but by our common interests, by our ambitions, by our aspirations, by the great things that we want to be able to do. But in order to do that, to serve all those that I just described right now, we've got to make sure that we come together at this defining moment of truth. And yes, it means voting, and yes, it means registering to vote, but I'm going to be honest with you, it means a whole hell of a lot more than that. That will not be sufficient to the task at hand. I need your help out there talking to the people who can decide the outcome of this election. There are people who are in the audience right now in yellow vests. They're holding up these clipboards. On those clipboards are open shifts to go knock on the doors and literally talk to the people who have the power to decide the outcome of this election. In other words, the power to win this on the night of November 8th. There are millions of our fellow Texans who, because of this voter suppression and intimidation, though they are eligible to vote, we've never heard from them. They've never cast a ballot. That's the majority out there that doesn't believe in all the craziness that we have going on in this state today. Let me describe that craziness by the numbers. It has been 1 month since the most extreme abortion ban in America went into law. It begins at conception, and there is literally no exception for rape. There's no exception for incest. And it happens at the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis in this country that is 3 times as deadly for black women. Now, some may think, hey, Beto, how in the world do we overcome that? I'll tell you this. Not only can we overcome it, we've overcome much bigger things against much longer odds before. Let me explain. 50 years ago, abortion was just as illegal in Texas as it is today. But no one rode to the rescue of Texas women. In fact, it was Texas women who stood up and got the job done, not just for themselves, but for the rest of this country. Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade was a young Texas woman. Her 2 attorneys, Linda Coffey, who still lives in Dallas, Texas today, and Sarah Weddington from Abilene, Texas. Those 3 young women prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court and won protection for the right to privacy, to make very personal, often very painful decisions without the government getting into your business or into your body. So look, if Texas women did that 50 years ago, almost to the day, my money is on Texas women winning it back on November 8th, 2022. Do not sleep on Texas women. They're going to win the day. I'll give you another number. It has been 19 weeks to the day. 19 weeks since 19 children and their 2 teachers were taken from us in Uvalde at Robb Elementary. Those kids, 10 and 11 years old, absolutely defenseless against someone who could walk into that classroom with a legally purchased AR-15, a weapon originally designed, engineered, sold to the United States military for use in Vietnam to be able to kill an enemy soldier at 500 yards, penetrate a steel helmet, and take him down dead. Those kids were not at 500 yards. They were at 5 feet max. Nothing on their head
but maybe a baseball cap. But they were also defenseless against a governor who, after 5 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history have occurred in this state in just the last 5 years, has done nothing to make it any less likely that any other child, your younger brothers and sisters, will meet the same fate in another classroom, in another community, in another part of Texas. The answers do not elude us. The common ground is right before us. Look, we may not all be able to agree on everything that we want to do to avert these crises and these massacres and these needless deaths of young people across the state. But we should remember, gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in the state of Texas. We have more mass shootings in schools in this state than does any of the other 49. This doesn't have to be our future. There's something we can do about it. And look, just like many of you, I grew up in this state. I grew up with firearms in the household. I grew up with parents who taught me not just how to use that gun, but the responsibility that comes with owning it. I think we can return to this responsible level of gun ownership in Texas. Here are my ideas that I've heard from you. 1, let's raise the age of purchase for an AR-15 to at least 21, right? By 3 more years for some kind of intervention in the lives of those who may need a little bit of help. Let's make sure that we have a red flag law so that if you have that gun already and are threatening to use it against yourself or against somebody in your home or one of these kids in a school, law enforcement through due process can intervene before it's too late. Those states that have adopted red flag laws like Florida, 23 days after Marjorie Stoneman, when those kids were killed in that high school, it took a Republican governor in a Republican majority state 23 days to implement a red flag law. School shootings and mass shootings in those states that have adopted them declined by 80%. We know that they work. And then a universal background check. And this is one where I have yet to find the gun owner, the Republican, the Democrat, the Independent, the Texan, who will argue the other side. All it says is, if you want to buy a gun in Texas, that's great. Let's just make sure that we go through a background check and ensure that you are not a danger to yourself or to anybody else. In Texas today, you buy from a gun store, you'll go through it. But you buy from a private seller, as a young man did in Midland, Odessa at the end of August in 2019. There are no questions asked. And he used an AR-15, not unlike that used in Uvalde, to kill 8 innocent people in that community. Those 3 ideas, they're not going to solve every instance of gun violence in Texas. I get that, I understand. But it allows us to keep true to the Second Amendment while better protecting the lives of the children and the people of the state of Texas. Can you all get behind that? That will work? There's this number. A little more than 18 months ago, the temperature dropped. And in the energy capital of the world, the lights stopped working. The heat stopped running. The water stopped flowing because it was frozen in the pipes in your house. And when you finally got the heat back on and that water flowed, those pipes burst. And they destroyed your floorboards and your drywall. And for many, your entire house. $10 billion of damage was done to private property owners across the state of Texas. 4 people in Nacogdoches lost their lives when the power went out because the guy in the highest position of power could not keep the power going to the people that he was supposed to serve. 700 more died across the state of Texas of hypothermia, of carbon monoxide poisoning, of burning up in their own homes when their parents set fire to the furniture, desperately trying to keep their kids alive by keeping them warm. And while all of that was happening, our governor pegged the price of electricity at its highest allowable rate, which meant that gas soon started trading at 200 times what it had sold for the day before. Those energy traders, pipeline corporations, made $11 billion in profit over 5 days while you were freezing here in Nacogdoches. It's the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. And to add insult to injury, that grid is still not fixed, and you and I as ratepayers are paying $45 more per month, caught left holding the bag. Here's the answer to that. We win this election. We weatherize and winterize every part of the grid. We connect ERCOT, our grid, to the national grid so we can draw down power when we need it, sell it back up when we have a surplus, draw those profits into reliability for everybody. And for that $11 billion that was stolen from us, we take those bastards to court and get every single penny back and return it to the ratepayers of the state of Texas. Before anything else, last one. I mentioned that we've got a governor who traffics in fear. And he's going to try to make us afraid of one another. He's going to try to make us afraid of issues that legitimately concern us. But we have to understand why they are happening and why they're taking place in Texas. One of them is crime, and specifically violent crime. And I can think of no more important role for government. In fact, those of you studying human civilization could probably tell me better than I could tell you that the only reason we have governments, at least initially, was to keep each other safe. No more important order of business. This guy is going to try to tell you that we want to defund the police. We want to let everybody out of the prisons. We want to see crime increase. But you need to remember that he's been governor for 8 years. Homicides on his watch up 50% in the state of Texas because when law enforcement, police officers, and sheriff's deputies begged him not to sign permitless carry into law. It replaced the license to carry program that worked with one that says basically anyone can carry a gun in public right now. No questions asked, no vetting, no background check, no training whatsoever. And none of us are the safer or the wiser for that. That's why homicides have gone up in the state of Texas. The governor, who when he was signing that abortion bill, with no exception for rape, was asked by a reporter, well, what do we do for the victims of rape in Texas? The governor replies, we're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. Here's the truth. More rapes have been committed in this state than in any other state in America. The ability to bring a perpetrator to justice has declined by half. That means there are more rapists out there and less justice for their victims. There are more than 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS headquarters right now in the state of Texas. That is the driver of violent crime. And on this whole thing of defund, let me just say this. No serious person believes that we are going to be able to exist as a state, as a country, as a community, as a society without these brave men and women who wear the uniform every day, risk their lives to protect our lives. And of course, we want to fund them, fully fund them, but we also want to make sure that we are funding training so that everybody is treated equally under the law, regardless of the differences between us. And we also want to make sure, and this is important, that there is accountability for those exceptional cases, a small minority of officers who abuse that position of public trust and use that life and death power indiscriminately against those who they are sworn to protect and to serve. And increasingly, and all too often in Texas and across America, against unarmed black men and black women. If there is not accountability, if there is not justice, we will not have trust. And without trust, our fellow Texans do not report crimes, they do not testify in trials, they do not serve as witnesses, and we have a breakdown in the ability to keep one another safe. So yes, let us fully fund law enforcement and also make sure that all of us are treated equally under the law going forward. And on this issue of funding, I want you to remember this and share this with your folks or anyone who asks you when they hear the radio ad. 7 years ago, the Uvalde Police Department requested funding for their radios because they didn't work when they were inside of buildings, like say a school building. The governor rejected the request for funding. They repeated it 6 years ago, and again 5 years ago, and again 4 years ago. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, on May 24th of 2022, when that gunman, 18 years old, walked into that classroom and began shooting those kids and teachers. Those law enforcement from Uvalde were in that building, and their radios did not work because the governor had not funded them. 911 dispatch was reporting that there were still kids alive as well as teachers with them who were calling 911, but they could not get the message to the officers inside on the other side of an unlocked door for more than 70 minutes. Now that doesn't explain, condone, or justify the actions of those who responded on that day. But it helps us to understand that if we're going to talk about funding, and accountability and justice when we talk about law enforcement. We need to hold everyone to the same high level of accountability. The other thing that I want to tell you, and I'll close on this. I love the fact that we are among the most diverse states in the Union. We are a people from the planet over. And I think that is so fundamental to our strength, our success, and yes, I would argue, our safety. My hometown of El Paso, one of, if not the safest cities in America, not despite, but because it is a city of immigrants. Those who come here to do better for themselves have by extension done better for all of us. But I'll tell you what, over the remainder of this campaign, 35 days left to us, you're going to hear this governor try to scare us about an invasion of illegals who are coming to get us and commit crimes and kill us and take our lives and do god-awful things to all of us. We all acknowledge that we have legitimate concerns and threats at the border. There are those who will traffic in illegal drugs like fentanyl that will kill our fellow Texans. We must be vigilant against that and do a far better job. There will be others who traffic in human beings. And we must also be better about stopping that and preventing these kinds of crimes. But for those who come here to work, very often to do jobs that no one born in Nacogdoches or anywhere in Texas is willing to do today, those who want to join family and right now are in a line that stretches 20 years long from Mexico, the Philippines, or India, those trying to seek asylum and have a 6-year adjudication, waiting to get an answer from our government, having fled their homelands, knowing that to return means to die. You don't travel 2,000 miles the length of this continent atop a train known as La Bestia or the Beast, some of that on foot, to show up at our front door here in Texas for kicks. You don't climb in the back of a trailer connected to a tractor that's pulling you into San Antonio, Texas, where 53 of those with you die, lose their lives on a hot Texas summer day to steal someone's job or place in school or benefits from our society. You probably do that because you have no other choice. So here's my argument. Instead of stunts like busing migrants to D.C. or New York or Chicago or building 1.5 miles of border wall, instead of this hateful rhetoric that describes immigrants as animals, infestations, or an invasion, which, by the way, prompts the kinds of hatred that we see, not just in the words we speak, but the 23 people murdered in El Paso, Texas on the 3rd of August, 2019. What if, against all of that, we came up with solutions? Solutions that Democrats, Republicans, independents alike are invested in. We say this: you want to come to this country? That's great. Follow our laws. And on our end, we're going to make sure that our laws follow our values. That means a Texas-based guest worker program. If you want to come here to work, I want there to be a safe, legal, orderly path for you to get here. You want to join family? A safe, legal, orderly path to do that. You want to claim asylum? Your adjudication period should not be 6 years. How about 6 weeks and you get an answer? And if it's yes, welcome. And if it's no, I'm sorry, but we've got to follow our laws and you have to go back to the country from which you came. No state in the union is better prepared to lead on an issue that has had no leadership since literally Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States. It's the last time that we rewrote our immigration laws comprehensively. So for those of you out there who come from immigrant families, those of you who are dreamers, who've been waiting in some kind of limbo to be recognized for the value that you provide to this country, a path to citizenship that allows you to provide even more, I just want you to know that I am proud that you are here. We're going to find a safe, legal path to get this right, and we will meet stunts and hatred and fear with solutions, ambitions, and our aspirations, and together we will get the job done. You all with me on this one? I think we can do it. To do any of this, we've got to win this election. So let me ask you, ready to win? Ready to do the work? I'm ready to do it with you. I'm so grateful to be back with you in Nacogdoches. We're going to hang out for a little while to take pictures with anyone who would like to. And the only thing I ask is if you do take a picture, please post it somewhere so that we can prove that we existed. And so that we connect with those in your network. They're going to be curious. They're going to want to find out. They'll get registered to vote. And they'll join us on the rolls. Thank you so much. Let's go.